The Dragon Quest series is one of the most influential and popular video game franchises that has ever been made. With a history spanning over 40 years, Dragon Quest has become an institution and a cultural touchstone. It all goes back to that first game in 1986. This is the story of Dragon Quest and how it set the standard for role-playing games ever since. February 10th, 1988. The streets of Tokyo and other major cities in Japan are bustling with excitement as thousands have lined up, waiting overnight for what was, on that day, the most anticipated video game of all time. Dragon Quest III. The fervor made national news, as a video game had never drawn this kind of reaction before. But what caused such a frenzy? How could a video game series be so beloved? The answer goes back a few years earlier, where an unlikely chain of events brought together the elements that made everything possible. Enix began operations in 1975 under the name Eidansha Boshu Service Center. In those early days, the company published magazines, earning revenue from advertising things such as real estate sales. The venture wasn't extremely successful, but survived into the 80s, when Japan was experiencing rapid growth and fortunes in the computer market. Seeing the potential, Eidansha used its established foothold in print media to cash in on the computer wave, renaming itself Enix, a portmanteau of ENIAC, the first programmable computer, and Phoenix, a mythical bird who was reborn from the ashes of his former life. The first order of business for Enix was an open call for software programmers, announced in the second half of 1982. The grand prize was 1 million yen, about 3,800 US dollars at the time. Overall, 3 million yen was distributed amongst 13 entrants. Each of those games became Enix's first releases. The million yen winner was a man named Yuji Horii, a writer for the manga magazine Shonen Jump. His entry, Love Match Tennis, was the first game published by Enix, appearing on the NEC PC 6000 series computers in February 1983. The Enix corporate philosophy ran counter to the status quo. Many computer games of the time had no mention of who designed them. Enix offered freelance contract work for all of its designers. And most importantly, Enix gave ownership to the creators of whatever Enix published, leading to royalty payouts, if a game were successful enough. Another winner from that contest in 1982 was Koichi Nakamura, with his game, Door Door. With his earnings, Nakamura founded his own programming firm, Chunsoft. Yuji Horii continued to design games, basically as a company of one, that Chunsoft would then program. The first product under this collaboration arrived in June 1983 for the NEC PC 6000. The Portopia Serial Murder Case. There was no action involved. The characters on screen didn't even move. The goal of the game is to solve the murder case of a well-known bank company president, done so through non-linear gameplay, with multiple avenues to progress forward. Actions were performed with a series of text commands, each producing different results. Also novel for the time was a telephone the player could use to call characters and receive more clues, as well as multiple endings, where if the wrong suspect is apprehended, the player is criticized for poor judgment and forced to try the case again. Portopia was a highly successful game, selling around 300,000 units. The game set the tone for the visual novel genre, heavily influencing later games like Snatcher. Portopia would later wind up on a TV game machine that wasn't even on sale at the time of its original release, Nintendo's Family Computer, which offered a much lower cost of entry to gaming compared to PCs. Portopia on the Family Computer had a simplified interface, but was the same core game, selling 700,000 units upon release in 1985. Along with a version of Door Door, which sold 500,000 units, it was clear that the Family Computer was the place to be. But before all the money could even be counted, Enix, Chunsoft, and Yuji Horii were already planning their next project. During the 2.5 years from Love Match Tennis to Portopia on the family computer, Enix's popularity had grown and the company had expanded. There was a second programming contest, bringing in more talent, leading to many more games. Some high-profile names began to attach themselves to the company. Musical composer Koichi Sugiyama, already well known from his work on Gatchaman and Cyborg 009, began composing music for Enix's games, his first soundtrack being Wingman 2. Licensed games, still a rarity on the scene, also appeared in Enix's early lineup. The popular Dr. Slump manga and anime series had several games developed in multiple genres, pulling the series creator, Akira Toriyama, into Enix's orbit. It all gave momentum to the biggest project Yuji Horii would thus far undertake, beginning in late 1985. A wholly new adventure for the family computer that brought these aforementioned creative greats together. A deep story with lots of text, character interactions, riddles, and clues were expected of anything sold by Enix. Family computer games were expected to leave some wear and tear on the controllers, so an action element, where a character can move freely on screen, was added. The new project sought to distance itself from Portopia. That game was set in the modern day and used real locations, Portopia itself being the name of an exhibition that celebrated the opening of Port Island in Kobe and its pier in 1981. For this new game, a setting and theme evoking the European Middle Ages was chosen, with many things left intentionally vague. It wasn't Japan in the 80s, that's for sure. The world was just somewhere else, a long time ago. In his ideas for this new game, Yuji Horii decided on a lone hero as the playable character. The player could name him anything, even your own name. The hero is you. He can come in contact with objects on a playfield, mostly interacting with human characters, villagers, shopkeepers, blacksmiths, a king, and a princess, but can also open doors, climb up and down stairs, find treasure, and use items found or bought in the game. The graphics were not very spectacular, just enough to understand what was seen on screen. The player's imagination was expected to do the rest. Non-human characters were encountered in one-on-one battles, and with much greater graphical detail. Akira Toriyama was drafted to design these characters. By 1985, his manga and anime series Dragon Ball was the hottest property around. Toriyama designed all of the monsters seen in the game, with many designs also appearing in the manual and packaging. They ranged from simple wild animals, drakees, and scorpions, to more complex, almost human creatures, skeletons, golems, and magicians. The most powerful ones are encountered much later in the game, namely the dragon and the ultimate force of evil, the Dragon Lord. As these designs were completed and sent back to Yuji Horii for approval, these fierce enemies helped give the game in progress its official title, Dragon Quest. With the themes, settings, and characters in place, Yuji Horii drafted Koichi Sugiyama to score the game. He composed 8 melodies that corresponded to main scenarios. With the potential for a massive hit and franchise, Yuji Horii founded his own company. He incorporated himself under the name Armor Project. Throughout the design process, Chunsoft programmed the game, handling hundreds of lines of Horii's text, turning Toriyama's artwork into 8-bit graphics, and digitizing Sugiyama's symphony. In the early months of 1986, Dragon Quest was complete. Enix would soon send the game off to manufacturing, a simple plastic cartridge holding a quest that would be remembered for many years to come. In the olden days of yore, the realm of Alfgard was cloaked in darkness. According to legend, a brave warrior, Loto, brought light back to the land by defeating an evil being. He used the Ball of Light, bequeathed to him by a god, to drive off the enemies of Alfgard. He then gave the Ball of Light to King Lars, who unified Alfgard and ruled as its first king. In the time of King Lars XVI, the Ball of Light was stolen by the evil Dragon Lord, plunging the kingdom of Alfgard into darkness. The people longed for peace, but did not give up hope. The great seer Maheta predicted that one day a descendant of the valiant Loto shall come forth to defeat the Dragon Lord. Who is this brave soul? There is only one possible answer: you. This is the start of your adventure. Although Dragon Quest would come with a detailed manual, complete with illustrations by Akira Toriyama. Yuji Horii knew from experience that most game fans don't bother to read those, instead playing the game straight away. With that in mind, the gameplay of Dragon Quest, all of its commands and features, are learned right from the start. In fact, you cannot leave the first scene of the game without understanding how every command works. Here, the player must speak to other characters, gather treasure, use items, open doors, and go downstairs. Speaking to the king also allows the player to register progress, so the game can continue later. In the first few minutes, a microcosm of the entire game is completely run through, giving the player everything needed to venture outside of the castle. Explanations from the king and his guards explain finer points of the game and reinforce the idea that it's very important to talk to everyone. During the quest, more subtle but recognizable guide rails are in place that move the game along. Battles with monsters occur randomly in the field. The kind of terrain the hero stands on determines what kind of monsters he will encounter. Grasslands will often host weaker monsters than those in mountains and swamps. Once you cross a bridge, the monsters increase in strength. Surviving more powerful monsters depends on your level. That is determined by how many experience points are earned, which comes from battles in the field. As the experience points rack up, raising your level, the hero becomes stronger and the battles easier. Monsters also leave gold pieces behind, which are used to buy items, including weapons and armor, that also make once impossible areas navigable. Battles are text-driven with a list of choices. Usually the player should attack, but has the choice to use an item, cast a spell, or run away. Spells can restore hit points or cause damage to enemies with more force than the current weapon. Other spells can be used outside of battle and function in the same way as items that can heal or light up dark caves. All spells use magic points, which can often run out quickly. Staying the night at the inn can recharge magic points and hit points, but it'll cost you. The text for all menus is usually white, but when the hero's hit points are too low, it turns orange. To defeat the Dragon Lord, several discoveries and events need to happen in a specific order. The quest begins with exploration of the kingdom and nearby towns, leading to buying or discovering items such as the magic key, which unlocks certain doors. Without it, the princess cannot be rescued. After returning her to the castle, she gives the gift of her love. Actually, it's just a compass, but absolutely necessary in finding the monolith, a stone tablet etched with the writings of Loto. That's needed to prove that you are of the same bloodline as the legendary hero and earn the Staff of Rain. Combined with the Sunstone and Rainbow Drop found afterwards, the hero can create the Rainbow Bridge, the only way to reach the Dragon Lord's castle, which, by the way, sits just across the water from the King's Castle, the first area of the game. Though a very short and simple story today, for 1986, Dragon Quest was massive. A full-blown computer adventure game on the TV, something that played like Ultima or Wizardry, only with much more graphical detail, like The Legend of Zelda. Despite all the hard work done beforehand, the real challenge was about to begin, as the first copies of Dragon Quest were sent to Japanese gaming store shelves on May 27, 1986. Although Enix was well known in the computer gaming space, and Portopia was a success on the family computer, Dragon Quest faced an uphill battle. The family computer was the hottest place for games, with new titles competing for retail space every week. The fiercest competitor was Nintendo themselves. Super Mario Bros., released in September 1985, was already the best-selling game in Japanese history and hadn't slowed down. With a strong back catalog and new games in 1986, starting with The Legend of Zelda, there wasn't much room for the growing number of third parties to share that same level of success. Furthermore, Super Mario Bros. 2 was set for release on June 3rd. The scene was already too crowded, and the expected champion was about to clear the room. As a byproduct of the 80s gaming boom, a cottage industry of gaming journalism sprang up to detail the events and uncover game secrets as they came along. Family Computer Magazine, Famimaga for short, gave their first previews of Dragon Quest in its May 2, 1986 issue. Here, the first ever images of the game were shown. Each of the screenshots was accompanied by tags. How can you defeat the magician? Talk to the village girl for information. A ghost appears. Call up the Ghostbusters. The sneak peek led to a more detailed preview in the next issue on May 16th. The feature properly introduced the term role-playing game to family computer owners. With many readers never having played an RPG before, much explanation went into the command system and its windowed interface, likening it to a dashboard or control panel. The preview concluded by reminding readers of Dragon Quest's release date, May 27th. In mainstream media, Enix ran a simple TV commercial in the style of a movie trailer, listing the all-star production team in Hollywood fashion, interspersed with clips of gameplay, ending with a credit for the starring role, you. In the first Famimaga sales charts after release, Dragon Quest debuted at number 2, behind Super Mario Bros. 2. Coverage in Famimaga after release was sparse. Most of its pages were dedicated to maps, secrets, and strategies. Dragon Quest had secrets in spades, but the heavy demand for Super Mario Bros. 2 shifted coverage that way. But a new gaming magazine soon stepped in to fill the gap. In the summer of 1986, Famicom Tsushin, later known as Famitsu, began operations. Famitsu covered Dragon Quest in every issue. There was never an official review. The famous 40-point system had yet to be invented. Instead, complete maps, explanations of items, their locations, and prices were fully laid out. An entire bestiary was published detailing locations, hit points, weaknesses, and experience and gold earned from each battle. Every issue provided something new, different, and exciting for those just discovering the game. The relationship was symbiotic. Word-of-mouth advertising for Dragon Quest was spreading. Demand for more information led to more coverage, which led to increased sales of the game. With more new owners, continued coverage led to more sales of Famitsu. This cycle shifted the balance of the fledgling gaming media, where Famitsu emerged as the most popular gaming magazine and best source for news and information. Dragon Quest stayed relevant thanks to support from Famitsu, ranking on their sales charts throughout the year. Continued sales added up, breaking the million-seller mark by the end of the year. Lifetime sales would add another 500,000 to the total. There was something else that demonstrated the popularity Dragon Quest had. Famitsu created their own poll for readers to list their favorite games. Dragon Quest soon found its way to the number 1 spot, often by exponential margins. Famitsu issued Dragon Quest its first ever Game of the Year award, as chosen by readers. The final tally had the game outvoting the runner-up, Gradius, by almost twice the votes. Dragon Quest also won an award for Best Character Design. The smallest, weakest enemy in the game, the slime, was also very cute. Players took a liking to them. Slimes became the official Dragon Quest mascot and a symbol of RPG fandom in general. What was not yet known to the public was that Yuji Horii had so much faith in his creation that before Dragon Quest went on sale, he began working on a sequel. Dragon Quest II was a massive upgrade from the original. The game supported 3 characters at once, as well as multiple enemies in battle, offering a more challenging game that required strategy beyond simply being past a certain level for an easy victory. Commands were simplified and streamlined. The map was several times larger, moving beyond Alefgard. Ships traveled between kingdoms, and new, different monsters were everywhere. The story continued 100 years after the hero defeated the Dragon Lord, where his descendants must unite to defeat the god of darkness, Malroth. In the same issue that declared Dragon Quest the best game of 1986, Dragon Quest II was first shown, setting up what would be, for many, the best game of 1987. When released on January 26, 1987, Dragon Quest II went straight to number 1, dethroning Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link, with a sales score 4 times larger that week, and larger overall when counting Link's previous sales. The actual amount of that first shipment was 500,000. The game received the highest cross-review score ever in the magazine's young history, 38 out of 40, a record that would stand for the rest of the 1980s. Eventual lifetime sales of Dragon Quest II would reach 2.4 million, and though the game would fall out of the sales chart eventually, Famitsu's Reader's Poll had the sequel on top for almost all of 1987. That September, Famitsu previewed what everyone had been hoping for, Dragon Quest III. The first mentions were nothing but a blurb stating that development was underway, followed by speculation about what to expect. It led to an unusual situation. as fans began to submit Dragon Quest III as their favorite game in the readers' poll, a game that hadn't even been photographed yet. This led to the column evolving into a most wanted poll, featuring only upcoming games, forcing entries out after release. Dragon Quest III served as a prequel to the first two games. The player lives out the legendary quest of Loto. The hero is the child of the legendary warrior Ortega, who sets out from the kingdom of Aliahan to defeat the archfiend Baramos, a quest his father could not complete. Together, the three games make a complete trilogy, telling the never-ending battle of good and evil in this land over the centuries. By the end of 1987, the release date was announced and set in stone, February 10th, 1988. On the eve of release, Famitsu, to almost no one's surprise, awarded Dragon Quest II Game of the Year for 1987. The same issue previewed the upcoming third game, as stores prepared for a rush of eager fans ready to part with their money. Enix and retailers anticipated a day one sales rush, and as such withheld the game from sale until 2 p.m. that day. The morning of February 10th, 1988 was something that didn't even happen at the height of Super Mario Bros. Thousands of people camped out on the streets overnight, waiting for the game to go on sale. The scenes made national news as crowds patiently waited for a chance to be the first to play the game. The afternoon release was planned not only to keep children in school, but also to avoid long lines early in the morning. To fans, it didn't matter. Kids skipped school anyway. Adults skipped work. The risk was worth it to avoid missing out. As the clock struck 2, the first copies went on sale. Within the hour, cash registers were full and shelves were empty. Dragon Quest III was sold out across the country. Those who went to school and showed up afterwards were out of luck. Another shipment arrived 10 days later. It too sold out instantly. The next shipments in March also went quickly. By then, over 1 million copies of Dragon Quest III were sold. Lifetime sales would reach 3.8 million. Dragon Quest IV in 1990 would sell almost the same number. They stood as the third and fourth best-selling family computer games in Japan, respectively. Dragon Quest was no longer just a video game. It was now part of the culture, stitched into the fabric of society. And, in some cases, proof that you were the most dedicated video game fan around. The news from Japan made its way across the sea in 1988, where Nintendo was experiencing the American side of a massive boom in the video game industry. 1988 was the breakthrough year for the Nintendo Entertainment System, the American version of the family computer, where the company achieved mainstream success.
It may be the most addictive toy in history, and it's definitely the hottest thing this Christmas. Nintendo video games.
Along with that came a new publication straight from the source, Nintendo Power. The very first issue was sent out in July 1988 to nearly every current NES owner. On one of the pages in the back, one article discussed gaming news from around the world. On this page were photos of the very scenes from February 10th. Though brief, the story mentioned that Dragon Quest was coming to America, and wonders if the reaction stateside will be the same as that in its home country. It wasn't Enix, but Nintendo of America who had interest in bringing the game to the NES, licensing Dragon Quest with the plans to make the game equally successful. The forerunner to Nintendo Power, the Nintendo Fun Club newsletter, announced in its winter 1987 issue an all-new game, Dragon Warrior, what would soon become the American version of Dragon Quest. The name change was a legal necessity. The name had already been trademarked by a tabletop RPG company a few years before. Fun Club News likened Dragon Warrior to The Legend of Zelda and details a few major gameplay elements. Curiously, no in-game text is shown. The game had not yet been translated, and there were other things beyond language that needed changing to make Dragon Quest Dragon Warrior. For all the admiration it had in 1986, Dragon Quest was a very clunky game. The graphics received a major overhaul. The hero was redesigned, his eyes were made bigger, his suit of armor too. Most importantly, the sprite of the hero could now turn left and right, as well as being seen from behind. In the Japanese version, the hero always faced forward. This also allowed a big frustration of the original game to be removed. Originally, the talk command was a two-step process. After selecting talk, the player had to select which direction he was talking, up, down, left, or right. If you chose a direction that wasn't facing someone, you had to try again. The other frustrating part for players in Japan was that the game saved data via a password system. It was very long and time-consuming. One mistake writing it down or entering it in on screen would lock you out. On the NES, a battery backup was included, a feature that became more common in adventure and role-playing games, starting with The Legend of Zelda. And then, the biggest change to Dragon Warrior, the English dialogue spoken in the game. There had never been a game before with so much text that required translation into English. That task was handled mostly by two people, Toshiko Watson, who directly translated the entire script, and Scott Pellin, who refined those changes. The final product resembled something out of Shakespeare's Henry V or The Tempest, a faux Elizabethan style laid on top of modern 20th century English. When people speak to the hero, he is referred to with the pronouns thou and thee. His items are thy. The verb hast is used often. Saving your game is given the colorful term, recording thy deeds on the Imperial Scrolls of Honor. Raising a level is celebrated by the message, courage and wit have served thee well. Many characters have also become anglicized. King Lars is Lorik. Princess Lola is renamed Gwaelin. And Loto, the legendary hero of the past, is now Erdrick. Though the translation was very detailed and ye olde English evokes a certain atmosphere, the names of spells were straightforward. Heal, hurt, sleep, outside, and all the others are as direct as possible, with no guesswork as to what they do. In Japanese, the spell names were nonsense words, hoimi, gira, mahoton, something that sounded whimsical and exotic, but were part of no language. With Nintendo as publisher, Dragon Warrior benefited from a deep corporate pocketbook. Covering the costs of manufacturing, distribution, and promotion was something Enix could never do. They didn't even have an American office. Also, Akira Toriyama and Koichi Sugiyama had zero name recognition in the United States. Things had to be approached very differently. Nintendo spared no effort on the packaging and presentation of Dragon Warrior. The box and label were very detailed, featuring a man in a suit of armor shielding himself from a dragon's flame. A 36-page full-color manual was included, a faithful translation of the one for Japan, though Akira Toriyama's artwork, having not been licensed, was removed. Curiously, many of the illustrations were redrawn the exact same way, just in a more American style. To assist players further, a fully detailed illustrated handbook was included in the box. At over 60 pages, it was an invaluable guide, covering every step of the game, with detailed maps for every area all the way to the end. Each town has a list of shop items, and each step of the journey, a list of recommendations of what to equip and what level to be at, was fully detailed. All of the illustrations of weapons and items were done in great detail, and includes a 3-page prologue of the events of Erdrick many years ago. Nintendo Power began to formally preview Dragon Warrior in its May-June 1989 issue. The initial article had no screenshots whatsoever. The popularity of Dragon Quest in Japan, and how the game is credited with creating its own genre, are also mentioned. In the July-August issue, Nintendo Power gave Dragon Warrior 12 pages of coverage. By this point, other role-playing games that were inspired by Dragon Quest, or simply rode the wave, had made it across the Pacific. The magazine boldly declares that Dragon Warrior is an RPG like no other, the true standard-bearer of the name, and the only game that draws the player directly into the action. Another 12 pages of strategy and maps followed in the next issue. The advice lined up perfectly with Dragon Warrior's official US release in August 1989. After which, Nintendo Power included a 32-page pull-out guide. Nintendo ran a full ad campaign afterwards. Several commercials with actors dressed as kings and knights preparing for battle were broadcast throughout the fall of 1989. As well, a stroke of pure serendipity befell Nintendo. Back in Japan, a Dragon Quest anime series had begun broadcasting at the same time. The first 13 episodes of this were localized for American TV by Saban Entertainment. Nintendo didn't have a hand in the production at all. In fact, the Dragon Warrior trademark only extended to interactive entertainment, not television. That 30 minutes of free advertising helped make Dragon Warrior feel larger than life when the series debuted in the US in 1990. With the immense success of Dragon Quest in Japan, and with the insane demand for current NES games, which had lines just as long as Japan, that also made national news, Nintendo of America was confident it had a hit on its hands. Company president Minoru Arakawa demanded a manufacturing order of 1 million cartridges to satisfy expected demand. Upon release, Dragon Warrior made a connection, reaching as high as number 5 on Nintendo Power's Top 30 charts, and stayed on the list into 1990. However, the game sold less than expected. More than half the order was left unsold after a year. The offices of Nintendo of America decided to create a unique promotion using unsold copies of Dragon Warrior as the centerpiece. Nintendo Power began in 1988 as a free publication. 100 full-color pages every issue came at a cost, and with rising demand, it was no longer an expense that could be offset. The magazine began offering subscriptions at $15 per year. Not to upset current subscribers who were now forced to pay, premium items were often included. In the second half of 1990, copies of Dragon Warrior were given out as a way to say thanks. Also, new subscribers could get in on the savings. Mailers and TV commercials were a very sly way to make every Nintendo fan very aware. The promotion was a success. Millions of pieces of mail were handled in a short time. Not just the solicitation for a new subscription, but all the replies, the checks or money orders for the magazine, and then the first issue and the game. In all of that, over 500,000 copies of Dragon Warrior went out in a very short time to subscribers both new and old. At the end, t-shirts celebrating the event were handed out to those who lived to tell the story. While giving away 500,000 copies of a game for free might seem like a failure, it really wasn't. Several 100,000 were still sold at full price from the 1 million manufacturing order. The large distribution allowed Enix to establish offices in America, bringing Dragon Warrior 2, 3, and 4 to the NES. Later Enix games appeared on the Super NES, including ActRaiser, Soul Blazer, and Ogre Battle. In 1990, Nintendo localized a second role-playing game, Final Fantasy by Squaresoft. Back in Japan, they were the number 2 RPG under Dragon Quest, and a friendly rivalry between the two ran throughout the 80s and 90s. With a boost in subscribers, Nintendo Power spread the word to even more fans, and with an understanding of how RPGs work, thanks to the free Dragon Warrior, sales of Final Fantasy and later role-playing games increased. They weren't as high as those in Japan, but often sold several 100,000 copies each, and with it a dedicated fan base that was slowly growing, becoming mainstream by the end of the 1990s. It's all thanks to Dragon Warrior, which truly deserves the lion's share of the credit for bringing the RPG to American living rooms, just as much as Dragon Quest did in Japan, just in a less direct and more roundabout way. Over 40 years after the original Dragon Quest on the family computer, the series has continued, with 11 games in the main series, several manga and anime adaptations, symphonic soundtracks of in-game music, endless merchandise, and even tributes and parodies in other games or on TV. The original Quest, from all the way back in 1986, continues to resurface over the years. As technology improved and fans get that itch to start all over again, the original installment has been re-released every now and then for fans to enjoy again or discover for the first time. In December 1993, Dragon Quest 1 and 2 received a proper remake on the Super Famicom. The biggest changes included better graphics and sound. Characters were more than 3 colors, and the music sounds like an orchestra. Commands were streamlined. You no longer had to choose stairs to go up and down, and the password system was replaced with proper save files. The framework for this version was brought to the Game Boy Color in 1999, which had an English translation show up in the year 2000. A separate Super Famicom remake of Dragon Quest III was also made in 1996, and was combined with 1 and 2 on the Wii in 2011 for a 25th anniversary box set. Along with the 3 games, both in original and remade forms, the package included reproduction guidebooks from Shonen Jump magazine, a medallion in a velvet pouch, a commemorative art book, and even more archival goodies on the game disc. In 2018, Shonen Jump magazine got its own version of the Family Computer Classic Mini in celebration of 50 years of publication. All of the games included were based on manga seen in the pages of Jump back in the 80s. Dragon Ball, Fist of the North Star, Kinnikuman, Captain Tsubasa, and many more stood side by side with Dragon Quest. Beginning in 2004, Dragon Quest was released for Japanese mobile phones. In the days before iPhones, there were multiple versions for a myriad of handsets. All of them were essentially the same, but varied depending on screen size and button layout. Collectively, this version racked up 3.5 million downloads over the years. In 2013, the mobile version was cleaned up for iOS and Android. Dragon Quest II and III were also remade in this same style. Those were later brought to the PlayStation 4, 3DS, and Switch between 2017 and 2019. These versions now stand as the official original versions. With backwards compatibility on the PlayStation 5 and Switch 2, these will likely go a decade or more without any changes. Dragon Quest still got one more remake, a definitive, final, modern version in 2025. The HD 2D remake brought the original game up to the graphical standards of the modern day, while retaining that classic charm from the 8-bit days. As the original game was rather small, it was bundled with Dragon Quest II, like usual. And with Dragon Quest III HD 2D remake released the year before, comprised the entire Loto trilogy. Just as back in the old days, the release day was a celebration, with large crowds turning out, just to be one of the first, one more time. Over the years, a tagline for the Dragon Quest series evolved out of scenes from the older games: bravery and friendship. Were it not for the bravery of Yuji Horii and the friends he made from his works, we certainly wouldn't have forged our own brave quests and made friends with other fans along the way as we lived out the stories of the characters played out on screen. Bravery and friendship. That's what Dragon Quest is all about.